So yeah, Brad, you just asked me if I have a dog or not, and here's my answer to that. Sir Isaac Newton said, "There is nothing that hates a vacuum as much as nature." There's nothing that hates a vacuum as much as nature. Well, Sir Isaac Newton never met my dog, so yeah, I am.
That's what's up. I have a dog too, so we're in it together.
Welcome in to another special edition of TBL News, the pod, or if you're watching us over on TBL TV or YouTube, TBL News, the video pod. If you want to see what two attractive young men look like, you might want to look somewhere else, but you could look here and at least find one attractive young man who's sitting here with me, and he's the reason that this is a special edition. Brad Smith. Brad Smith is here. He covers the Glass City Wranglers for us here at TBL News. Nobody knows the Glass City Wranglers like Brad does. Brad, how you doing today, man?
I'm great, Nick. Thanks for having me on today.
No, it's a pleasure to have you on. I'm glad. It's about time, I say. He was ready to do this a long time ago, but I was lacking in my preparation. So, Brad, I'm glad I finally got my you-know-what together and can have you on the podcast here with me. So let's jump right in, man. It was an interesting weekend for the Wranglers. They lost a couple of times to Kokomo. Good games. Some trends showing up, particularly for our boy Ice Darrington, who might be thawing just a little bit. I don't mean to throw shade his way. We love Darrington on this show. He's a great, great player. But he is, at least statistically speaking, starting to show some chinks in the armor, maybe, have a little bit of trouble. Talk to me a little bit, Brad, about what you're seeing from Chris Darrington there.
Absolutely. Yeah. So let's take it back to the beginning of the season. Chris Darrington started the season off hot. Multiple 27-point games, had a 37-point game against Lebanon, and then goes off for 43, 40, and 44 in the span of 2 weeks. Darrington was lighting it up, and these last couple of games against Kokomo, he has kind of slowed down. In their first game against Kokomo, which was a 10-point loss, Darrington only had 27 points, which, to say only, that's,
right. Compared to what he's capable of. Yes, exactly.
Absolutely. 27 points on 7 of 17 shooting from the field and 2 of 8 from downtown. And then 2 days later on Sunday, Darrington, pretty similar stats, to be honest. 27 points, 5 of 15 from the field and 2 of 9 from three-point range. And he's had plenty of turnovers these last couple of games too. Had 4 and 5 respectively on these last 2 games. And he's a good facilitator. 8 assists, 4 assists against Kokomo, but the shooting is what I'm really concerned about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, are you seeing the defenses play him differently, or is he? Or maybe he is now a victim of a hot start. That is to say that he was on fire at the beginning of the season. People got super charged up thinking, oh, Darrington could win MVP this year. Glass City could make a deep run. And maybe this is more like the Chris Darrington. Maybe he's just not the most efficient scorer, but is always able to get to the free throw line for his points. And as you say, he can facilitate. I think he's got a couple of games in double-digit assists. And you mentioned the 8 assists he had against Kokomo this weekend. Or do you think that maybe defenses are shifting towards taking away his tendencies, and now it's his turn to adjust and become that early season Darrington that we all love so well?
Yeah, I'll go with the latter. And I think the big issue that Darrington is having is just the amount of pressure that the defenses are putting on him. Now, in the Upper Midwest Conference, obviously you have a lot of great defenses in Kalamazoo and obviously Kokomo the last couple of games, but the teams that Darrington and the Wranglers have been playing, it's not a great variety. They've already played Jamestown twice. They've played Kalamazoo 3 times, including 3 straight games. And then they've just played Kokomo for the 3rd time this season. So these defenses are really adjusting and they're adapting to Darrington's play style. And I feel like that's part of the reason why he's struggling. Because we've seen in games when he played West Virginia, he had a great game. First time they played each other against Lebanon, had an excellent game, including, the game winner.
Yep.
His 3rd of the season.
The interesting game winner.
Right, obviously. So, it is concerning to see his play drop off, but you do have to take in the context of it. These defenses are among the best in the TBL. Not only that, but they have experience playing against Darrington. But that does lead me into our next point, which will be the reliance on his teammates, which is going to be a big thing in the coming weeks.
Yeah, that's what we were talking about as we were preparing for this episode of TBL News, the pod, TBL News, the video pod. Again, if you're watching on TBL TV or on YouTube. And that is finding that Robin to his Batman, or maybe Robins, if you can say that plural. What do his compatriots in orange, what do the guys like Anthony Carmen and Heath off the bench, what do they need to bring to the table? Or maybe it's not so much their responsibility and it's more Darrington's responsibility to find them and get them more involved. But either way, what do we need to see if Glass City's going to right this ship, get back in the W column from guys who are not named Chris Darrington?
Absolutely. Yeah. And basketball is a team sport. Obviously, you can have that one player that's going to go off and he can carry the team some nights, but it's not going to be every night that happens. So with a team like Glass City, they don't have that dominant front court that other teams like Kokomo or Lebanon or Albany have. So what they have to do is they have to rely on their guards, and they have an excellent trio of guards, including Darrington. But let's focus on Alexander Heath and Anthony Carmen for a second. Anthony Carmen, starting shooting guard alongside the two. And Carmen, he's been excellent these last couple of weeks. Against Kokomo, had 20 points, 5 rebounds, 5 assists, 3 steals, 2 blocks on 8 of 11 shooting.
It's a full stat line.
I know. Excellent stat line for Carmen in the first game. And in the second game, very similar. 22 points, 10 assists, 8 rebounds. I mean, he's playing extremely well, and he's going under the radar because of Darrington. Darrington is that household name. But Carmen, very good shooter off the touch, off the dribble, very good at cutting, and he's a great rebounder too. Well, I'll throw a stat out at you. Chris Darrington has one of the highest rebound averages on the team at 4.6. The next highest is Anthony Carmen at 4.8. The only guys averaging higher, Marlon Sierra and Chance Hawkins, both forwards. So Carmen, him and Darrington aren't known to rebound the ball, but from a statistical standpoint, they're among the best on the team and in the division. So that's going to be a big thing moving forward. And then Alexander Heath as well, kind of that scoring spark plug off the bench. Had 16 points in the first game. In the second game, did not play. But regardless, Heath has been having a great season this year, averaging 11.9 points per game on very efficient shooting splits. So I feel like for Glass City to be successful, they have to have this trio of guards clicking on all cylinders. And if Darrington's having an off night, they'll really need those other two guys to step up and play some of their best basketball.
Yeah, you mentioned a couple of items there that I want to key in on just a little bit. One of them is efficiency, and the other one is rebounding. So let's talk efficiency a little bit first. As you mentioned, Darrington's recent scoring struggles. He went from a very efficient shooter on a high volume shooter to the past several games, as you mentioned. Maybe these teams are getting familiar with him and knowing exactly what he doesn't like, spots on the floor where he doesn't excel, and they're pushing him to those spots. So his efficiency has gone down. Meanwhile, Carmen's has actually increased. So we got to talk a little bit, and I'd like to hear your thoughts on how the team overall gets more efficient. And I also want to hear what they can do about this rebounding thing. I mean, that's a lot of pressure to put on a group of guards to say, you guys got to hit the boards, especially if they're going to be making up for forwards who aren't hitting the boards as efficiently, at least, or at least as aggressively as a team like Kokomo's forwards. I think a couple of guys in the last game, or maybe it was the game prior, had double-doubles. And you're not seeing that a lot out of the front court for Glass City. So talk to me about efficiency, talk to me about rebounding.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, efficiency's got to be the biggest key to unlocking the potential for Glass City. Like you said, Alexander Heath's shooting has drastically went up on higher amounts of responsibility and usage rate. I mean, right now he's shooting 60% from the field, 54% from three-point range, an absurd amount. Darrington, on his absurd usage, still shooting 46 and 37% respectively. So it's not like Carmen is the quote-unquote best shooter on this team. But outside of those two guys, you're not seeing a lot of high volume shooters that are really knocking down shots at a considerable rate. I feel like Santiago at the power forward position, he's got to be better. Taking these screens from Darrington or Chance Hawkins too, that would be a big way to improve this team. Also, Jelante Brown, Chance Hawkins, like I mentioned earlier, and Marlon Moore too, Marlon Sierra as well. All of those guys are good scorers. They're capable scorers. Glass City has 7 players averaging double digits right now. It's just a matter about getting those guys at the bottom of the rotation, taking more shots, hitting more shots, and kind of getting that attention off Darrington. Because Darrington is taking an absurd amount of free throws each game, averaging about 16 attempts per game from the charity stripe. And while that's great, and he's hitting a lot of them at a great rate, in fact, hitting them at 85%, it's still worrisome about the injuries and kind of the strenuous that can take a toll on his body.
Mm-hmm. He's playing a lot of minutes.
Absolutely. And that offense, it just doesn't work in the TBL. We've seen it. It doesn't work in the NBA, and it certainly won't work here. So that's going to be the biggest thing about efficiency, just spreading the rock, just getting everyone shots up. And as you mentioned with the rebounds, got to crash that glass with the Glass City Wranglers.
Now, Glass City got to crash that glass.
Obviously, yes. So right now, Chance Hawkins leads the Wranglers with 6.9 rebounds per game, and then Sierra at 6.5. But after that, it's the 2 guards that I mentioned earlier, Darrington and Carmen, that are right there with their respective rebounds. And by the way, 4.6 rebounds per game for a guard, that's pretty elite. Absolutely. I mean, Chris Paul, regarded as one of the best rebounding guards in the NBA throughout his career, averaged right around that mark of 5 rebounds per game. So both of these guards are certainly doing work inside the paint. But outside of those guys, you're not seeing a lot of rebounds from the big men on Glass City. 4.5 for Jelante Brown. Alexander Heath has 2.7 at the guard position, and then Santiago at 2.4. I feel like that's going to be a really big issue moving forward if they don't improve, because like you mentioned earlier, Kokomo, one of those teams that can crash the glass, that does it at a very, very good way. Throughout their entire team, 2 players notched double-doubles in the first meeting, Edward Oliver Hampton with 20 and 13, and then Fudge Moore had 10 and 12 as a guard. So, it's going to be hard when you're playing teams like that in Kalamazoo that are really good rebounding teams. So for Glass City, just to recap it all, got to be more efficient, got to spread the rock, and also crash that glass.
Yeah, I'm with you. You watch these games from a more expert perspective than I do. That said, I'd love to see these guys hit the offensive glass specifically, just a little bit more, because that just serves as a sort of catalyst of a ripple effect. So by that, I mean, if you grab a couple of offensive rebounds here and there, 2 things happen. One, you obviously get another opportunity at the bucket. And if you're physically at the bucket, if you're one of these big guys, a Sierra, grabbing an offensive rebound or 2 a game, that could be an extra bucket or 2 for you. And suddenly you're not averaging what Sierra averaging somewhere in the range of 9-10 points a game.
Yeah.
Right? And suddenly if he becomes a 13-14 point a game scorer, that relieves a lot of pressure on Darrington. Simultaneously, a lot of the shots they're missing are coming from deep. And that means long rebounds. When there's a long rebound, that's a fast break opportunity for the other team. That's an easy bucket waiting to happen. You get the front court hitting the offensive boards just a little bit harder, just a little bit here and there. Hey, look, and it creates a potential 6, 8, 10-point swing every game. And Glass City's played in so many darn close ones, I think that it could really help them a lot if these guys could hit the offensive glass. So speaking of hitting the glass, they're playing some teams who do so pretty effectively, one of whom in Kalamazoo. We all know about Darrington's miraculous buzzer beater against them. But look, it's a game of inches. If that buzzer beater is off by an inch and he misses, I'm not sure what kind of conversation we're having, not only about Glass City, but also about Darrington as a potential MVP candidate. So they're facing Kalamazoo again. They're also playing West Virginia this weekend. Preview those games a little bit for us. Tell them, when are they playing again? When are these games?
March 30th against Kalamazoo and April 1st against West Virginia.
All right, so they got the Thursday, Saturday. It's somewhat of an unusual one. You typically see the Friday, Sunday, or maybe even the Saturday, Sunday. Talk to me about this game. So what do we want to see our Wranglers do to get back in the win column? It's been a little while for them now.
It has, yeah. As a TBL fan and, just a lover of basketball, I would really love to see another buzzer beater from Darrington. I would love to see him get back to those 40-point games that he had earlier on in the season. Against Kalamazoo, he had a 44-point bomb on 11 of 17 shooting from the field. If we can see another one of those types of games from Darrington, I think there's going to be a lot of motivation from this Wranglers team outside of Darrington too, and it's going to get them really fired up for the rest of the season.
That's a great point.
Now, as one of the experts of the Wranglers, I really want to see a win. Yeah. And like you said earlier, this last week was strugglesome for the Wranglers. They had that 2-point win against the Grind on Thursday. Friday, disappointing 10-point loss to the Bobcats, and then they followed that up with a 7-point loss on Sunday. So getting a win with the efficiency, with the improved rebounding and crashing the glass, I feel like that's going to be key for Glass City moving forward. Now, against the Grind and the Galaxy, their records, they don't look great. Kalamazoo 3-5, they're third in the Upper Midwest. The Grind, they're 0-3 and 7th in the Midwest. So it's not like these teams are, blowing other teams away, but because of the fact that Glass City plays so many close games, both these teams have a great chance to upset them this weekend. Like the Wranglers' total point differential plus 35, but in games that they've won this season, they're averaging 8.3 points per game of a margin of victory. In games that they lose, they're losing by about 7.7. So, it's a wide range of outcomes for these Wranglers, but ultimately the most important thing is to just see that continued good play of Anthony Carmen, Alexander Heath, Darrington, just less reliance on Chris Darrington in these next couple of games and kind of a greater reliance on the team. Crash the boards and just continue to become more an efficient team.
Yeah, I'm with you, Brad. And sometimes all it takes to start winning again is to start winning again. They got to find a way to get a W. As you mentioned, a couple of shots go this way or that, and this team has 5 losses, and they're sitting in the middle of the Upper Midwest. So if they want to get that momentum building again, I agree with you. I would love to see a guy like Delonte Brown. He's a Toledo guy. They brought him in to give Darrington a little bit of pressure relief. You mentioned Heath off the bench. Come in for that Heath check. Come in and hit a couple of threes. Stem the tide anytime the game starts to not go their way. And I'll tell you what, Carmen, if he can keep up this sort of efficiency or anything resembling it on the offensive end, I do think that Glass City will turn this around. But I also think as long as he keeps those hands in those passing lanes, they got a shot. So it's a competitive conference. We know that. Again, Kalamazoo is a couple inches away from being in second. And I think Kokomo is probably the toast of the town when you talk about the Upper Midwest. But West Virginia played Glass City real tough. Kalamazoo has played everyone in the Upper Midwest real tough. It's no cakewalk. Brad, thanks for walking us through all of this as we dive into the details regarding these Glass City Wranglers who are so very intriguing.
Absolutely, yeah. And one more thing to add about their upcoming schedule.
Tell me.
2 weeks after their games against the Grind and Kalamazoo, they're going to play Flint, who, Michael Bruce is a fantastic scorer. And then they're back in Owens Community College against Kokomo. So if they can win these 3 games and kind of get a nice tune-up in preparation for that game against Kokomo, I could see a different result in the win column for the Wranglers and possibly notch a 4-game win streak across these next 3 weeks.
It's a pivotal time. We're coming into crunch time real quickly in the TBL season here. Went from early season to mid-season real fast. So everybody keep your eyes open, not just for what the Glass City Wranglers do on the court, but for everything Brad Smith writes and covers off the court. And you mentioned Michael Bruce there of the Flint United. Brad's got a great article about him, his sensational abilities. Don't sleep on Flint. Don't ever sleep on Flint. Make sure you check into tblnews.co. Read everything that Brad Smith's got to bring to you. It's a wealth of information. And keep up with us here on TBL News, the pod. TBL News, the video pod, if you're watching us there on TBL TV or on YouTube. Of course, you can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, et al., et cetera, and the like. And Brad, here comes that awkward part where we come to an end, and I tell the audience listening at home, I never know how to end these darn things, but I keep coming up with the same solution to the ending of these shows, which is something along the lines of, from the TBL News Desk, signing off. What, is that microphone plugged in or what?
It's not plugged in, no. I can't find my brother's cable to it, so, I mean, all good, though, and, nice vanity.